Hi, welcome to Shine Connect's LGBTQI panel, where we'll be talking today about can cancer care be more inclusive? And I have wonderful guests with me today. I'm so glad to be talking about this with all of you. But our community, of course, is wide and it is varied and it is diverse, and all of us have quite different things that we'd be looking for. And we really want to hear from you. So if you have any experiences that you want to share, any ideas, we really want you to enter into this conversation, because we're not just talking about cancer care in the medical community, but also cancer support services. If you go to Macmillan, if you go to Maggie's, if you come to Shine, what makes you feel relaxed and comfortable? What makes you feel included? We really, really want to hear from you. So we have the lovely Stuart O'Callaghan joining us for the question and answer at the end. And they run Live Through This, which is a cancer support group for the LGBTQI plus community. But right now, I know you're dying to see the faces in front of you. I have with me Angie Beckles, Charlie, and Scott. Hi, how are you all doing?
Good, thank
Good.
you.
So I've got a sneaking suspicion how the answer to this question might go. But as of right now, how are you feeling about this question? So do you think that cancer care can be more inclusive? I'll go with Angie first.
I mean, definitely, yeah. I mean, I think all healthcare could be more inclusive, and I think sometimes with cancer, because it's such a big, like, overwhelming illness to deal with, that it just kind of makes things that aren't very inclusive, that were maybe just a little bit annoying or a little bit upsetting, like it makes them much worse, because you've got the whole cancer thing to deal with on top, and then also, someone keeps messing up your pronouns or calling you by the wrong name, or making a lot of assumptions about, maybe you tell them you have a partner and they keep referring to your wife, and you're like, no, it's not actually, my partner's not a woman. Um, yeah, so I think there's like, yeah, there's definitely, I think, a lot of scope for things to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And Charlie, how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think there's definitely a lot of assumptions that are made. I talk about my partner and they say, oh, he this or he that, or, or there's, the automatic question of, I don't know, what contraception are you using at the moment? Things like that. And you just think, well, you're absolutely making an assumption there. You actually, there's so many more questions you could be asking before that. So yeah, I definitely think that there's scope for improvement.
Yeah,
Education.
I think it's
on that.
Absolutely. It's all down to education, isn't it? It's all, our community is changing and coming out of the so many cupboards and closets, and with we come with new pronouns to people. We've been talking about this for years and decades, but for a lot of people, it's all brand new information, and we need to be educating the NHS and GPs and nurses and doctors all about the LGBT community, so that they feel comfortable talking to us, and we feel comfortable listening and talking to them. And just like your examples, I was signing for the stem cell chemo. They were like, and this may affect your sperm. I just started laughing. It was like, no, I've never had kids anyway. But yeah, let's just do it. So it's just that assumption. And I'm big and bold enough, but there are lots of people who aren't, and it can really put them back into a closet or into a darkness that they shouldn't really be there when their days are already dark with cancer.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is you can start to fracture your sense of self by putting yourself into, and you already do that to a degree when you have cancer, because you kind of have to put your head down and get through to some degree. Like it's overwhelming, it's too much. Yeah. But then to have to slice off bits of your personality or bits of your identity or bits of your relationship or your identity or your gender expression, then that it has, like, when you're already depleted, it has it can be anything from draining to devastating,
Yeah.
the effect of that. Yeah. So Angie, can you tell me a little bit about what was going on in your life when you were diagnosed?
Yeah, so that was kind of, I guess, around the same time I was deciding, um, that I wanted to kind of actually transition in terms of my gender, as opposed to just sort of thinking, well, I'm not a woman, but I'm not sure what I am. So I kind of slapped a label on it around that point. And I guess in some ways, going through the whole cancer thing did push me to do that, because it was like, well, actually, um, you know, potentially this is something that could kill me, and I'd rather, if the worst happens, that at least I'm kind of being authentic to myself. But it was sort of made quite difficult because, I mean, like we've all been saying, just lots of assumptions. So it was like, when I went for, so I had breast cancer. So when I went for my consultation before I had my surgery, and it was all kind of like, reconstruction, and you can have this and you can have that, and it was like, but actually, that's not what I want. Really, what I want is actually just to get rid of both of them. But you're assuming that I must, because you see me as female, that I must obviously want reconstruction. And it's like, well, maybe I don't. Maybe you could actually ask that question and not assume things, especially because, at that point, I'm quite vulnerable and processing a lot of new information, and, quite upsetting information. And it's just like one more thing where I'm going, oh, I kind of feel like my only options are kind of reconstruction. It doesn't feel like there's space for any other options.
Was there anyone on your team that you felt that you could talk to about your feelings about it?
Not particularly. I mean, it was one of those things where obviously a lot of the time I was seeing, a variety of different registrars. So you don't really, you don't always see the same person. So it's hard to kind of build a rapport with them. And I was quite unfortunate because, as it happened, my cancer nurse specialist was going on holiday just as I was having my surgery. So although she did, it kind of gave me the name of her counterpart at one of the other hospitals. Um, that was part of my trust. That person was really unfriendly when I contacted them. So I literally only contacted them once, because I was like, okay, I don't, like, I feel like I'm being told off for contacting you when, I was given your details by your colleague. So it just, yeah, it just didn't really feel, I didn't really feel kind of, particularly welcome to kind of come out about any of this. I did subsequently, like later on in the process. But kind of in the first sort of 6 months or so, it was like, no, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to get through this and just sort of try and deal with things. And there were a few things that I kind of had to sort of push back on, because I had this whole thing where, so I changed my title, and that kind of kept getting changed and changed back, and people going, well, what's this? I don't recognize it. And I'm like, well, okay, so it is a slightly unusual title, so I use MX, but it's also not that unusual, and the NHS as a whole does recognize it. So it's kind of
It
like,
is one of the options that's on the list. Yeah.
yeah. So I was like, you ought to know that. And then I had a whole exciting and fun issue with my name, where for some reason they kept changing it to my next of kin's name, and that took, in the end, that took about 3 years, and me threatening to complain to the ombudsman before they finally got it sorted for good.
So even your regular name, they were calling you by a completely different name. So it wasn't even just that they, with the MX, that they weren't using it. They just, you were getting called for appointments with the completely different name.
Getting letters. And it was weird because it was just, well, it was the name and the phone number, but it was like my date of birth, my hospital number, my diagnosis, my medical history, just literally the name and, and the contact phone number. And I don't, yeah, they kept telling me it was some kind of computer glitch. I'm like, well, maybe, but and it just it felt like it was very hard to get them to take it seriously. At one point I said to them, look, you understand this is like a data protection breach, and they were like, yes, but your next of kin didn't actually get this letter that we sent with the wrong name. And I was like, that's only because it occurred to me that she's not a patient at your hospital, so I opened it, because otherwise I would have sent it to her. But it's also like, you having incorrect information on my file that I've told you about is also a data protection breach. Like, they didn't seem to, I don't know, it felt like they weren't taking it very seriously, and I kept on, like having to repeatedly, I complained like 3 or 4 times, and like I said, it took me going, I will be taking this to the ombudsman if I don't hear anything, if it doesn't get fixed. And then the head of information governance rang me to tell me how terribly sorry he was, and that it would definitely 100% get fixed this time, which, to be fair to him, it did. So,
well, I mean, talk about like, I literally like holding on to your sense of self when you're in there, and having your title keep getting changed, having your name keep getting changed, and then wanting to express your feelings about your surgery, and that maybe you want a different option than the one that was assumed for you, and again, like that kind of feeling all out of place. That really sounds tough.
yeah.
Did you end up getting the surgery that they recommended initially?
I mean, I didn't get reconstruction. I got so I ended up having a right sided mastectomy and lymph node removal. So that was which was what they recommended. And kind of, if I had felt that I had an opening to do so, I would have liked to have floated at that point the idea of just taking both of them at the same time. But I didn't really feel like I had space for that. And it's like I kind of had a lot of chasing up to do just to get stuff done in the first place. So I didn't really feel I had more kind of spoons to deal with getting kind of extra things done. I was like, okay, let me just just try and get my actual surgery done, and then just go from there.
Because there is, a lot this question of kind of symmetry and evenness, and this option of having reconstruction in order to have both present the same way, and so it does seem like it should be then available, that if you wanted both removed, that should be available.
Yeah, that's absolutely what I thought, and I was told nope, unless you are very high risk, so you've got what's it, BRCA1 mutation or something like that, then they're not going to do that. They're just like, no, you're not high enough risk. And I was just like, there's no medical reason. And it was just a bit like, but there's no medical reason to do reconstruction. That's purely for someone's psychological well-being, which is exactly what this would be. But obviously, that's not something that as an individual you're likely to get very far with. To say, actually, this is the same thing but reversed, so you should do it. I didn't really have the energy to kind of push that, because it was like, I've got enough with just periodically having to contact you to say, please change my name back to my actual name, and dealing with the normal kind of stuff, that treatment related stuff,
fatigue and the brain fog and everything else, and it can be really, really tough to advocate on top of all of that. And did you access like support at like Maggie's or anywhere else at that time? Was there any other place that you felt like you could get support and have someone to talk to?
I did get some support through Maggie's, not kind of quite at that time. It was probably about 6 months in, I think, after I'd finished my chemo and radiotherapy, and I think actually I heard about Maggie's through Shine. It was definitely not through my cancer team, which you would have thought it would be, especially since Like there's a Maggie Center where I actually had my treatment. So, but yeah, so I kind of turned up, kind of really upset for I can't remember exactly why at this point, and just kind of came in and they were like, "Oh, do you want anything?" And I was like, "Can I talk to someone? I'm just really, kind of upset." And I just went and kind of cried at someone for half an hour, and they were lovely. They were great. Like I definitely recommend them to anyone. Um,
Did you feel like there were signs there that it was kind of, they were open to, hearing about you being non-binary and like some of the things that come along with that?
I think so. I mean, I don't remember anything like really strongly either way, but I don't remember feeling like I had kind of had to hide it. It wasn't, like at that point, it wasn't like the main thing that was at the top of my mind, because that was kind of when, I was just like really, really just fatigued and just like, stressed out about, oh, do I need to start thinking about going back to work, even though I'm really tired all the time and I can't hardly do anything. So it was sort of like I was more focused on those kind of things, but it did feel like a really safe space, kind of like in all sorts of ways.
Yeah. And how has it been with Shine? Like, did you
Yeah, I mean, I think
and
again, like I most of the time when I've been interacting with Shine, it's kind of been um it hasn't been something like at the top of my mind that I've been like, oh yeah, I'm going to discuss it. So not like, we are today, but I mean, yeah, again, it definitely did feel like again, a space where I could have discussed those things, if I needed to, yeah.
yeah. And that's the thing, is like you do have like all those things that you come in with, like you've got all the concerns of treatment, of scans, of everything. And, yes, like different things fall to different parts. And it's like how to, different people have that thing of kind of like scanning like a room, kind of like, is this a good place to be my full self, or do I need to play the pronoun game? Which I've heard a few times. And I think, when you have a little bit of a radar for these things, like, I remember being in a talk and it was about sex, and someone repeatedly like not giving a pronoun, and I was like beep 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 beep, like, okay, interesting. And what what makes somebody kind of bring them able to bring their full selves, and what makes somebody kind of like still in that environment be accessing support but still kind of behind like a little bit of I mean, again, it's an understandable self-protective bubble, right? Like there was times in the hospital that like if a nurse was coming, I didn't want to deal, and I just dropped my partner's hand. I'm like, get away from me. Like, I don't know who's going to come in the door. I don't want to have to deal with potential issues as a result. And so I was just too tired. I was too tired to deal with that. Yeah. So Charlie, how is that hearing kind of about Angie? Was anything in there that you would kind of relate to in terms of hearing about assumptions? And
yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? My personal experience was different because my wife is a doctor, and so straight away I think that I was dealt with very differently. Because I think she was also, well, she was a junior doctor, and she was a junior doctor in the deanery where I was being treated. So even if they didn't know her, they sort of knew of her, or they knew that she was working in the. So for me, it was very different. But from, I've in other areas of healthcare, so not in my cancer treatment, but, where other times where, yeah, you go in and they sort of make assumptions about who your partner is. Oh, gosh, years and years ago, I went into the hospital with my ex, and the person that saw us in A&E was just like, and who are you? And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm her partner actually. And he's like, oh, sorry, I didn't realise you don't look like one. And I was just like, wow, okay. I don't look like one, thank you.
Oh wow, it's like that is when you want to remind someone that was your external voice. Like
yeah, exactly. Do you realise you were saying that out loud?
yeah, wow, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah.
So
Sorry.
the doctors then, knowing that your wife was a doctor and that she was in there with you, and knowing that she was your wife, do you feel like they stepped up their game a bit?
Oh, probably, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would imagine so. But they also, in some ways, though, they may have used language that I might not have understood quite so well because they're talking to her rather than me.
Interesting.
Yeah, but it's been really interesting because I was talking to my wife about this recently, and she said, what you heard and what I heard in that room were two very different things. So sort of when we came out and talked about it, she's like, no, that's not what they said. They said this. It's like, oh, okay. And I hear that a lot through meeting people through Shine, and they say, oh, the doctor said this. But then later they said this, and it's like, well, did they actually say that? Or did you just hear that? Because you do, you know, what I heard was, oh, we could just go in and take out half your thyroid and it probably isn't cancer. And what my wife heard was, right, you need to have all your thyroid out because this is definitely cancer. so
Different.
Yeah.
It really goes to show that, you know, if somebody does have a partner or someone to bring with them, you know, either through COVID or, you know, through worrying. I mean, again, sometimes, you know, some people, a little bit like me dropping my partner's hand, just won't bring their partner because they're like, I just don't want to,
They don't want to
you know,
explain.
they've had a bad experience before, you know,
Yeah.
in the past, maybe have had a traumatic experience and they don't bring their partner, but then they lose something in those meetings. They lose that person to bounce and reflect and hear, you know, different things. So Charlie, tell me about like what was going on in your life when you were diagnosed.
So it was my wife to be. We were 6 weeks away from our wedding, and we were sort of planning our wedding at the time. We'd moved because she was a junior doctor. We'd met in London, and then her job was moving. She had to do a 2 years foundation, 1 year in London, 1 year in Kent. So we moved out to Kent and sort of lived halfway between the hospital she was working in because I was still working in London. And so we've been there maybe a year and a half, something like that. And yeah, we were just sort of full steam ahead, getting ready for the wedding. I was at work, washing my hands, looked up and thought, my neck looks a bit swollen. That's a bit weird. Didn't think too much of it because my mum's got a goiter. So I was just like, oh no, I've got a goiter. God, that's going to look pretty unsightly for my wedding. That's what I thought. And yeah, so I went home and Vicky felt my neck and then said, yeah, I think you need to go and see the GP. I was studying for exams at the time as well. So I was really busy with that. And then I just didn't even bother making the appointment. And then she sort of chased me up and said, you made that appointment? Oh, yeah, I'll do it. She's like, no, you really need to do it. And yeah, I feel very fortunate that I did have her with me. It's very, very weird though, because it sort of blurs the lines between wife and doctor as well, which was quite awkward at times. So yeah, when the surgeon sort of said to me that, you know, I need to have surgery, I said, well, we're getting married in 6 weeks' time. Can it wait till after then? He's like, no, it can't. Oh, okay. So yeah, I was operated on 3 weeks before the wedding, but I was determined that I was going to be there.
And you made it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But I didn't have a voice. So yeah, there was complications with the surgery, and I ended up with vocal cord paralysis. That they said, oh, sometimes it's just like this for a day or two. You know, sometimes it can take longer, and it was 6 weeks in the end with no voice. So yes, I was this little wisp of a voice like this when I was saying my vows. But yeah, I had so I had the surgery, and then I got the official diagnosis on the Monday, got married on the Friday, and then the following Friday I had my first oncology appointment to then sort of prepare for treatment after that. So yeah, it was the wedding was not the most stressful thing in our lives at that time. So whenever I hear people now sort of saying, "Oh, my wedding is so stressful," I think, really? But yeah, so I think for me, I didn't have, you know, I had a positive experience because people knew who my wife was, and so I didn't really have to explain things. But I do understand the whole coming out. It feels like you're coming out, you know. Well, people say, "When did you come out?" It's like, well, when didn't I? I come out every week, really, you know, one way or another. And you know, but like you said before about, you know, traumatic experiences, you know, I came out in the 90s, and, you know, back then you could be fired for being gay. And so, you know, you were constantly on your guard and keeping it a secret. And so that stays with you.
Yeah.
It absolutely stays with you. You always have that fear of, is this a safe space to be who I am?
Mm-hmm.
And then I sort of feel like that with the cancer now as well. Like, is this a safe space to share with people that I've had cancer, as well as the fact that I'm gay? So it's like a double coming out now.
And I think that actually you having that experience, you know, at that hospital, of, you know, not experiencing kind of any either unthinking or kind of discriminatory behavior from people, shows that it can be done. Like, I think that that's really important, you know, when someone goes through an experience and it was handled really well, and they acknowledged your partner, and, like, you know, what does it take to make people feel comfortable? And yeah, so and acknowledging the relationship, I think is a huge thing, and not presuming. And Scott, that was a little bit with you as well. Like, how did your doctors like your partner?
Oh, they much prefer him than me. Like, they all know. I'm really lucky that Tris was there with me when we got the diagnosis, because it was just, oh, you need to go to hematology. You know, there were times when he was always with me that they'll talk to him like you were saying, Charlie, you know, because your head is just a mess. So, you know, and Tris is much more sensible and articulate than I am, and so he kept all that information. But all of the doctors knew of him. I've got a really positive story. But when COVID came along and my treatment started to be changed at UCLH for the stem cell harvest, because I have a blood cancer called myeloma, COVID was in that I was only one going into the hospital to sign release forms, etc., and to do some face-to-faces that were vital, like the bone marrow biopsies, etc. But the consultants and the nurses were saying, let's get Tris on the phone. Let's make this a three-way call that he can actually hear the information as well. So we were really lucky in that way.
That, I mean, that is brilliant. You know, and yeah, and that's the thing, is like, there is access to that, and there is kind of more ways to bring somebody else into a room and still acknowledge that relationship, still acknowledge the benefits of that, and especially kind of more creatively now as well. So what was going on? Sorry?
I think it's allowed it, so we can actually now involve other people, you know, and technology isn't so foreign to the NHS.
Yeah, and so what was going on in your life when you were diagnosed? What was happening?
Well, lots of people say 2020 was the worst year, but for us it was probably 2019. We had to close our news platform, Gay Star News, in 2019 in June, July, after running it for 9 years and setting it up ourselves. So we had to let go 25 members of staff globally and close our doors. And for those 6 months, I was feeling really fatigued and tired. Feel quite ill after lunch, and you know, I could feel a pain around my kidneys. But the GP said, you know, it's nothing, go home, sort of thing. I had a back spasm a few months before, So I was already in pain. I was taking a lot of painkillers, and I was ignoring the vital signs. Then we closed the business. The next day, I had to go to A&E because my back was so bad. I was finding it hard to breathe. So 6 hours in A&E in midnight, not fun. But then they told me to go back to the GP. I insisted. Some more tests started to happen, and it took a little bit of time. But they figured out that my kidneys were failing. Where everyone's kidneys are, say, 90% active or 95, mine were down to about 45%. Then I got a call from a nurse to say, you need to go to A&E now. Your kidneys are down to 35% within the week. And we had our suitcases packed. We had just been told to go have a weekend off, and we were going to go to the Isle of Wight to spend in a friend's cottage. And with our suitcases, had to go to St Thomas's A&E, and then they couldn't find anything. I had all the tests there, another 6 hours in A&E, but they said, go home. We're going to get you an appointment on Monday at the kidney specialist at Guy's. And then from there, my blood samples went all around the hospital, and haematology gave me a call 2 weeks later. So on the 18th of September, I was diagnosed in a magnolia room, which is always fun. Told I have myeloma, and now we need to take you to have a bone marrow biopsy straight away. And that was really tough. They couldn't get the bone marrow because I seized up. And it was, my muscles were too tight. But it was grim. But luckily, my partner, my husband, was with me.
So at the beginning of your treatment, your partner was able to be with you.
Yeah.
For everything.
Yeah, and he was there. They knew he was my partner. We were holding hands. No one questioned it. I mean, I'm really lucky. I'm a white guy. I'm a gay cis guy living in central London, and my hospital is Guy's Hospital. So my story is, great for me, but I know it's not that great for everybody else, and I'm very lucky in that. And Tris was with me during those biopsies as well, holding my hand and calming me down. And it just so happened to be an LGBT doctor who was doing the procedure. So, the lanyards, I know a lot of people will kind of say they don't see why they need them. It actually reassures an LGBTQI person when they see someone with a lanyard that's a rainbow LGBTQI lanyard. You can see with their pronouns, etc., on their names badges now. I don't know if that's all hospitals, but Guy's is definitely doing that. So I think that those small things really help and put someone like me at ease.
Yeah, I remember my doctor outed one of his nurses, and I think it was kind of like, let's get this out of the way. My nurse is a lesbian, and I think she's amazing. All right, go. And yeah, there is something like I didn't realize how much I was holding until kind of he did that, and I just went, okay, like that's one thing I don't have to worry about is, what's he thinking?
Yeah.
And, and it was a big sigh of relief. And, every week they were also like, if she wasn't there, like, where is she? Like, is she okay? You guys still together? It was a, checking in. Yeah.
I'm probably one for oversharing when I see a doctor or a nurse. You may as well get it all out. And, when the nurse was coming in for injections, I got my shirt up already, and they were like, no, put it down. We've got some. No, let's just do it, So I'm probably one for oversharing and over talking in those situations. And normally I've been, helping others within the cancer centre when you're having chemo and talking to them. So I think it's just, I've been lucky because I'm that way. Now, if you have someone that is shy, someone who is actually questioning themselves or going through a different journey, it's not going to be that way. So we need to have our consultants and our nurses. I mean, nurses are great, right? They are the best thing ever in a hospital because they see more people than anybody else within that hospital. They deal with more situations. So more often than not, the nurses are okay to any kind of situation, I feel, for an LGBTQI person. One of my nurses was started in the AIDS era and is finishing and was supposed to retire but stayed on during the COVID era. And we were just talking about what they've seen and, you know, etc. And these older generation people need to be talking to the younger generation of nurses and doctors just to give examples and to talk about how things are. And like us, if we're brave enough and if we're okay enough, we should be talking, because the government isn't going to help at the moment. We've got the most racist, homophobic, transphobic government that we can ever imagine, and it's going to get worse. So if people like ourselves and Shine and other cancer charities can be helping LGBTQI people, then it's going to make it a lot easier for us all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that and know, for doctors even knowing what to know, you know, like, I mean, how did you find oncology doctors kind of understanding of, you know, gay men's sexual health issues?
Pretty poor. And I was teaching them and talking to them about PrEP, which is a drug that a gay man can take, or any person can take on daily to help them have an active and, you know, sex life without the fear of contracting HIV, which would lead on to AIDS. So we can eradicate HIV and AIDS. But a lot of people that I was talking to didn't understand this. Now, LGBTQI doctors and nurses did, but not everybody. So I was talking to them about it and educating them, and about sexual health clinics, etc., and saying what will happen if this or what would happen if that. So I think a lot of literature needs to be out there. A lot of people need to be, a lot of doctors and the nurses need to be educated on this. But there's a lot to do, and it's so. I think a lot of, you know, a lot of people in all of life, they have a fear that they're going to get it wrong, and they should feel comfortable if they do get it wrong. You can apologize. It's happened to me. They've apologized where they've said wife or you know, a slip of the tongue, or about the children signing off for chemo. You're not going to be able to have children. I was like, don't worry about that. So it's okay for them to get it wrong, but if they keep getting it wrong, that's a different matter. If they're doing it on purpose, that's a different matter. So it can go both ways. We've just got to be kinder to the doctors and nurses because they're under a lot of stress at the moment. But also they should be kinder and nicer to us, because when you're a cancer patient, you have so much going on in your head that really your gender and your identity and your just well-being, your mental well-being really shouldn't be on the table at that point. It should be about getting rid of that cancer and making you feel happy and safe and comforted.
Yeah, and it sounds like a lot of it also comes down to questions. So kind of having the right questions to ask at the right time that isn't super assumptive, because, you know, I mean, you know, it's not my area, but I don't know like what cancer drugs could react with PrEP. So if somebody hasn't even asked the question, somebody could be over here accessing this drug that actually could be counteracting, you know, there can be so many things that actually could have, you know, bigger effects just because there isn't a dialogue, that the question's never been asked. And it is that, you know, almost like sitting down and asking questions without the assumptions that go with them. So whether it be kind of around children, or like Charlie, you were saying some friends of yours, some lesbian friends of yours weren't offered some of the same services.
Yeah, well, it's just conversations that I've had through other people that I've met that have had cancer, and just that they didn't feel that the sort of preservation of their fertility was given the same importance, I think, as heterosexual women.
Wow.
Because, you know, there is the assumption that if you're gay, you're not going to have kids. Well, actually, that's not necessarily the case, and so, you know, preservation of fertility should just be a question. You know, is it something that is important to you? There shouldn't be an assumption whether it's, you know, you should have it or you shouldn't. I mean, I'm sure some people sort of feel like Angie was saying, that it one way gets pushed on you. Actually, it might not be right for you anyway.
Yeah.
But
It's
yeah,
that
Scott was,
understanding.
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, what Scott was saying earlier, I agree with about your privilege as well. So, you know, I knew that I had the privilege of having a doctor as a partner, and I did feel that gave me a different sort of experience, definitely, to some of the experiences that I've heard through other people that have had cancer. But it, you know, it just goes to show that you can, it can be done, can't it? You know, you can, everybody can have a good experience. It's just educating, but I don't think it's up to the patients that are going through treatment at the time to be the ones to educate.
Yeah, but I mean, like, an issue that I didn't have myself because I don't take hormones, but a lot of other trans people I know have been having cancer, and the first thing they want you to do when you start treatment is stop taking hormones, because they don't understand that for a lot of people that is actually life-saving treatment.
Yeah.
You know, they're just going, oh, what, you know, you can just stop that, and you're like, you don't understand what that will actually do to me. You know, and yes, you know, depending on what kind of cancer you have, it might be not that advisable to continue, but you know, like, you have to, you know, like, it just sometimes feels like you kind of have to weigh up, you know, potentially kind of, you know, saving your life sort of physically with saving your life mentally. And you shouldn't be put in that position. They should be going, okay, you know, you must keep taking this because that is what allows you to keep on kind of with your life. What do we need to do to adjust? You know, do we need to give you additional treatment or something to make sure that you can continue to do that? And instead of like, oh no, we don't want you to be taking hormones. Who knows what that will do to your treatment? It's like, okay, but not that the cancer treatment isn't important, because it obviously is, but also, you know, there's the whole rest of my life, and you know, the whole thing where I feel like myself, you know. And I think, yeah, it is very much, because it's quite hard to explain to people how bad it can make you feel when your body's not right. I mean, I never had dysphoria as bad as a lot of other people do, but since I finally had mastectomy on the other side in December, and I keep just finding myself kind of looking at my chest and grinning, because it's like, wow, it actually, now I look the way that I've wanted to look essentially since I was 11, you know. And I think it's really hard for people to understand that if they've never gone through it, and be like, it's not actually like you're thinking of it as being like cosmetic and superficial, but it's really not.
Yeah. There's really a lot to weigh up, and doctors do tend to kind of be on the kind of like, okay, we're just looking at this one bit right here, and then you've got cancer support services that are, you know, often like filling in the gaps really of like what should be considered and having some place. And so it is really important then that places, you know, feel really inclusive and feel really you know, for us to be able to come with all of these things and have somewhere to, you know, unload and process them. And you know, although this is an LGBTQ plus panel that we're doing today, all the sessions throughout the rest of Shine Connect are welcome to everyone. And kind of speaking about sexual health, you know, our sex workshop is going to be co-run by a gay man, and so like, you know, at Shine, they really want the inclusivity to run through every single thing. So whether it be fatigue or a gamers session, or how, you know, that everyone feels, you know, kind of feels held and feels like, you know, that they're welcome, really, because that's what we want. I know at this point though, it's been so lovely to talk to you, Scott, but I know we're going to say goodbye to you now. And but hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Lovely. And we're going to go live to all of you. So if you have any questions, any comments, anything you think should go on the list of questions, the list of things not to make assumptions about. We really want to hear from you. And so right now we're coming to you live.